Hello, Sacha Barbour Gatt with you. And before we get started on this deep dive, a heads up, we will be discussing child sexual abuse. And if that's not for you, feel free to skip this one and we'll catch you in the Arvo app. You might have heard Chris's deep dive off the back of today's Headlines app, talking about how big tech is failing Aussie kids when it comes to stopping them falling victim to child sexual abuse. In particular, there's a new focus on sextortion and also abuse being carried out through video calls and live streams. It's something that more and more kids are falling victim to, with Australian Federal Police reporting a 40% increase in reports last year compared to the year before. Today we're going to hear from a dad whose son almost fell victim to an online sextortion scam, his regrets in how he dealt with it, and what his advice is to parents after going through it himself. Matt Acton is 1/3 of B105's Stav, Abby and Matt in Brisbane, and he joins me now. Matt Acton, welcome to the briefing. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us today and to share your story. I want to hear about how you found out that your son had almost fallen victim to a sextortion scam. Walk us through it.
So my son, he's now 23. He was around 14, 15 at the time, and he had his own phone. We gave him access to social media. It was mainly Facebook and Instagram around that time. It was quite a while ago. And we always had the rule, we said, as long as you have this phone and we give you the freedom of it, that we have access to check it anytime that we see fit. Knowing the responsibility it is for someone that young to take a phone and have access to everything, we have also been 14 and 15 before, my wife and I, so we knew what could possibly happen. So I found out through a spot check just going through messages one day and saw that he'd been talking to a girl, and it was someone who we'd never met, not someone from his school or group of friends, and thought, oh, I'll have a look at this and just check what's going on. And, yeah, that's when we noticed that it was quite sinister what was going on in the message thread.
Yeah, so what did you read? What were they asking for?
So it started out just friendly, like, you know, just chatting, normal teenage sort of stuff. And then it started to get sort of flirtatious as sort of the messages went on. And, you know, it was a pretty looking girl in the photo, and that's obviously makes you feel good as a guy when you're getting someone saying how handsome you are or whatever. And then it takes a really sharp turn at one point, asking for a photo of him and then also asking for nude photos. Now, we're so lucky we caught it at the point we did because it didn't get that far where he actually had replied with anything. But the scariest part was when they ask for the photo, they're very specific on how they want you to position it, what they're asking for, and not just the fact of being nude, but they always ask for your full face to be in the photo and facing the camera. And that was the biggest flag for us when we found that. We were kind of like, that's a very odd thing to be asking for, and being very specific about what you want in the picture.
It's every parent's worst nightmare to think that their child might be the victim to something like this. And as you said, you guys got it before, thankfully, it got to that next level. But how did you then respond? What was your, I suppose, initial reaction, but then how did you deal with it going forward?
It's probably one of my biggest regrets of it, and I got really angry and we punished our son for it in the fact of we took his phone away from him. He had an iPhone. We gave him like one of the old school Nokias where you could just text and call. So he had no access to social media or anything like that, which became a problem because all of his basketball team were on like a messenger chat. So he got removed out of that and then missed a lot of sort of events with the basketball team and things like that. Obviously, there needed to be some sort of, not punishment, but understanding from him, you know, that we had said don't speak to anyone who you don't know, and he'd broken our trust on that. But what I wish I had have done was not gotten so angry about it, because at the end of the day, it was a predator who'd chased him down. He hadn't gone looking for that. Yes, he broke our trust by interacting with what he thought was a young girl when he wasn't meant to, but a predator chased him. You know, if someone old school, what we used to always see a predator as, rolled out of a van and tried to coax a child in, you would blame them for that, not the kid. So that would be one of my biggest pieces of advice is for parents is be really careful on the way you initially react, because your feelings can really make you go further than you probably need to at the time.
In defence of you and your wife, though, things were very different. This was about 10 or so years ago, right? So the conversation around child sexual abuse material, exploitation material, how kids are being targeted, I mean, this was probably only just really starting to come to the surface 10 years ago about, you know, people messaging kids and telling them how to provide those images and then using it to possibly extort them. So, you know, do you feel that if the same thing had happened right now, your reaction would have been different because you know more?
I think so, definitely. And we've heard more stories now of it happening to teenagers, and we've seen outcomes from it, and there's cases where you've heard about how they do their sextortion, on how they say, well, we're going to send it out to everyone on your Facebook, or we're going to text it to your parents and that kind of thing. So I think you've got more things in place now where you can explain it better to them. There's also more controls on phones and on apps and things like that than there ever has been before, where there never really was at that point. It was just sort of like, there you go, you've got it, away you go. So I think we definitely would act very, very differently. I would still be the same. I've got younger children and they're just in that starting to have a phone now. They're beginning high school, and we have the same rule again with them, which is that we will check it any time that we want to. No phones in your bedroom, you know, without the door open or things like that. But yeah, I think you're right. We probably would act a bit different now.
So I guess then you have an interesting perspective on the social media ban, given that you've got young kids now who are going to be impacted by that, who are being impacted by that. The law's in place. We're not debating it anymore. But I'm curious to know, you know, given what you went through with your son, did it make you feel better to kind of know that your kids can't access social media at least easily under this new ban, or is it more complicated than that?
I still have the same opinion of it, which is it's our job as parents to be across it. My biggest fear with the new social media ban is that we go, well, the kids aren't having it, so then that's that. I don't believe that's true. They're going to sneak on there. They're going to continue to have them, and it's really important, I think, that parents are across it more than ever and making sure they understand how they work, how the ecosystems work within each different platform, because not only do we need to be checking if our kids are still on there, when they do turn 16, your parenting isn't finished then. You've still got a couple of years to guide them through that. So it's really important that as a parent you get yourself up to speed on the technology.
I want to go back to the story with your son. I'm curious to know, did you confront the person who had been messaging them? Did you involve the police at all?
No, we didn't at the time. We just sort of blocked and deleted them and got rid of them straight away. I didn't follow up with the police, which that's probably another regret. We probably should have. But I think for him, he was really embarrassed as well once I had explained to him what was going on, and he didn't really, I think, want to go any further with it either. So that's the other thing is, you know, you've got to deal with not just what could have happened, but also once the child realises they thought they were having a flirtatious moment with someone who liked them, then all this shame sort of comes over them that they've been tricked, because they've kind of, even though he didn't send any photos, he'd given a part of himself flirting back with what he thought was a young girl, but was probably, you know, a middle-aged man, who knows. So no, we kind of left it at where it was.
Do you think there are enough resources available to parents so that they know how they can better protect their kids in these spaces? Do you think that those tools exist?
I think they do. There could always be more, as always. I do, like I said before, think it's really important as parents, we need to be the ones learning as much about this as we possibly can, and we need to be taking the lead on it. You know, when we let our teenagers get a license, we get them to drive with us for 100 hours before we say, okay, you're ready to now try it for your license. And I think it's the same with social media. You're giving them access to absolutely everything and anything. So we need to have the same mindset of putting them inside a car on that danger as handing them the internet with Facebook, TikTok, all that kind of thing. So they're definitely there. I'm lucky I'm in the world of social media, so I probably know a little bit more than others, but I would definitely encourage people to treat it in the same vein as that.
Before we let you go, we know that the major tech companies have access to tools that can help stamp this out before it gets to that point, and they're not using them as they should. Is that frustrating to you as someone who has personal experience with this?
Absolutely. You know, they make a lot of money, like billions and billions of dollars. So it's not like they can't afford to enforce some of these things. And I think where it's been sort of missed, and this is where our governments need to probably be more harder than just saying you can't have access to it till you're 16, is, you know, you've got traditional medias like TV, radio, print, who all have very strict guidelines on reporting, the type of content that can go to air, classification of adult content and stuff, whereas the internet and social media is just free for all. It all just gets chucked out there. They've essentially got a broadcast license, so they should have the same legislations and same responsibilities as all traditional media, I think, to ensure that the content on their platforms is as safe as it can possibly be.
Matt Acton, thank you so much for sharing your story today and for joining us on The Briefing.
Great to be on. Thank you.
That was B105's Matt Acton speaking with me there. And that is all for this episode of The Briefing. Thanks so much for joining me. If this episode did bring up any issues for you, you can contact Lifeline on 13 11 14 or dial 1-800-RESPECT. I'm Sacha Barbour Gatt. I'll catch you next time.